We wrap with Reusse 3 days a week here on Mackey and Judd, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You can also find Reusse Unchained with Judd on scorenorth.com and anywhere you find podcasts. So, Pat, the Vikings are staring down the barrel here of Kyler Murray. You got Russell Wilson, the Kevin Stefanski schemed, I guess, Browns.
That might be steamed.
They might be
I
steamed,
think
too.
I wouldn't. They're going to beat the Seahawks. They're not going to win Sunday, but they'll beat the Seahawks. Seahawks aren't that good. I know Russell's never lost to them, right? Isn't he 7-0 or something like that against them? But
I mean, I feel like, I don't know.
He's good, but I don't think they're any good. I think they're very, very, very mediocre. He wanted out, for God's sakes, Russell. That was the thing to do this offseason, was to express your unhappiness. And he certainly deserved the right to have more unhappiness than Rodgers, because he's been running for his life for 4 years there with behind their pathetic offensive line. So, but I think they will when they come home, they will beat the Seahawks, but they're not going to win this week. I would doubt very much.
How do you keep Chandler Jones from pulverizing Cousins? That's my question. If Rashad Hill is to block him, God help everybody.
C.J. Ham is going to have to stand right behind Rashad Hill the entire game, right, and try to tackle him once in a while and try to do something. Yes. Chandler is 5 sacks in a game. I mean, you got to go back to ancient times for that. That has to be Deacon Jones against somebody who's terrible or something. Bruce Smith in a terrible blowout. That's incredible. Yeah, I don't see how they win this week. The only turnovers or Kyler throws a couple of bad passes that hit one of the Vikings defensive backs in the chest, which is probably they drop it anyway. But as I said earlier this week, that the secondary for being rotten doesn't get quite as much pub as the offensive line does for being rotten. But that secondary to me is in trouble.
Well, they're basically gambling that Patrick Peterson that Mike Zimmer is gonna find the youth well for Patrick Peterson. And Breeland was good for the Chiefs last year, but there's a reason why Breeland was still out there weeks after free agency ran its course. And then Mike Hughes gets the game-sealing interception for the Chiefs in Week 1 at the end of that one.
You got a hard time being mad at him for letting Hughes go, though. I mean, as much as good an athlete as he couldn't play, he couldn't stay on the field. But obviously the Chiefs see something that they like, and he's an athlete. Yeah, look at the guys they're playing. Who's this other? What do we think of the other safety? Did he do anything? I don't even know who the other safety is.
Xavier Woods. Yeah, he was with Dallas for a few years.
He's just a guy, right? He's body. So,
he's average to above average player if you trust Pro Football Focus.
And the cornerbacks there. I mean, Patrick was great, but the story on him for at least 2 years has been, why isn't Patrick as good as he used to be, right? Isn't that been basically he used to be the best in the league. Now he's not. So now you get him, right?
Yeah.
If he was still the best in the league, he'd still be in Arizona. So
if Kendricks and Barr can't play, God help you too. Like
what's
what
Troy?
I
didn't see this.
Calf again now. He didn't practice yesterday, and my guess is game time, if that. But if you're down to like Troy Dye, Ryan Conley, whatever they have there, that could be a long day.
And one of the games I was watching the other night, or commentaries, shows I was listening to, was the renewed importance of linebackers in the modern NFL, having good linebackers, because that middle to do something with the middle passing game that is nobody throws the ball. They used to say, the linebackers were the guys you didn't want to pay huge money to because the games were decided with the defensive line and the secondary. But the middle passing game now is nobody throws the ball down the field anymore. So it's not like the linebackers chasing a guy 40 yards down the field like they used to once in a while. But they got to be able to cover somebody in that 15-yard passing range and move around. And I mean, Kendrick's their best player, maybe on both sides of the ball. So it's
Yeah, I think to your linebacker point, it's like there's been this 20 years ago, the Jack Del Rio type with it was like the neck roll, the arms all taped up, and they were there to stop the run, right? They were there to plug the gaps and stop the run, and now it's like, oh, now you have to go cover Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski,
yes.
15 yards up the seam and keep up with a slot receiver potentially coming across the seam. So it's a different. You're right. It's more important, but it's a different type of role than it was 20 years ago.
Have they ever in this new era when they've always been right at the cap? They've had some cap room this year, so it hasn't been a much of a problem. But have they ever? I mean, beyond Cousins, Anthony Barr has had to be the dumbest thing they've ever done. Paying him a ton of money to come back the second time on the second contract, right? I mean, he doesn't play. He didn't. Yeah. What did he play? 2 games last year or not?
Yep, got hurt the second game.
2 games last year, and
he missed a month the year before.
Yeah, and he's he'll probably come back and play 2-3 games. And I was out actually seeing Paul Krause yesterday, and about a piece I'm going to do for Sunday about Wally Mick Tingelhoff just died, and how that old collection of Vikings all ended up living out there together in Lakeville and raising their families. But he was telling Bud stories, and the old thing about these guys, obviously 100% different game, what is required to play as an athlete now. But these guys bought homes out there and raised their families without ever having to change jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, they played for 10, 12 years, but they played. Look at it. He missed 2 games in 12 years or something like that. Mike Marshall missed none. Mick Tingelhoff missed none.
God.
I mean,
you know why? Because they got their bell rung and then they got right back in.
Right. There were no MRI machines for Mick Tingelhoff. Right?
There's somebody. I think it was Zambi that told me this. 7-8 years ago. The biggest change in football isn't training; it's diagnosis. It's diagnosis that they now find, and baseball too. They now find an injury, right? That the guy used to say, "I got a sore shoulder," and they rub it down and say, "Well, I
cool.
feel around back there," or they take an X-ray, some blurry X-ray on a $500 X-ray machine, and they didn't send them through 3 MRI machines looking to see if there's something. See a little tear in there someplace.
It would be it would be really interesting to sit down off the record with Zim and get his opinion of this. I bet it drives him crazy. Everybody going, we got to take him to the facility to get him we got to see if something's wrong with that hamstring. Yes. It might be just a little. Zim's like, yeah, just spit on your hamstring and rub it and get back in the game, dude.
Yeah, Zim's the old pirate is. He's not going to be around if he doesn't win a playoff game. I don't think.
I feel like if this season's already kind of off the rails, losing week 1 and your linebackers might be out. We'll see what happens. But if they fire him, I would almost guarantee that he becomes a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator at some point. In the like he'll latch on with a good team or the Cowboys or something with Dak. And go coordinate the defense.
Yes, he will not give it up at age 66 or whatever the hell he is.
No, he'll coach till he'll coach another 10 years. He'll be Monty Kiffin basically.
Dick LeBeau.
83 years old. Yeah, Dick LeBeau.
Dick LeBeau. I'm 92, but I'm still scheming defenses.
He'll be on his staff 10 years from now when his kid's a head coach. He'll be on the staff. That's Monty. Monty did. That's true. So the wise old owl has a good piece today in the Star Tribune on 60 years ago today. The Vikings beat the Bears. And there's some great quotes in there from Tarkenton about, real analysis of Van Brocklin as a coach, basically saying, knew a lot of football, but he was a deranged human being. It's pretty good stuff in there. He's got Raquel Marshall talking about him too, and that, in 60 years of Viking football, it's probably the most unexplainable victory ever.
The first game, yeah.
They humiliated the Bears on opening day, 37-13. And they ended, and I remember being a 15, 16-year-old and saying to my buddies, how the hell did that happen? And then they went 1-11-1 after that. They lost their next 7. It wasn't like, well, they're better than we thought they were. No, they weren't, but they beat the Bears 37-13 on opening day, and Tarkenton ran all over the place. And these old Bears defensive linemen like Doug Atkins, who was a big, slow guy, and instead of, nobody had ever thought of the concept that you run around these big guys instead of trying to block them, and Tarkenton's running around and this guy's down on his knees, huffing and puffing. And it's if you can find any video of that game, we didn't know what, the crowd was 32,000.
I'm glad you brought this up real quick because you got Kyler Murray against the Vikings this weekend, and there's that clip that went around of him. Judd found the nugget that he ran 43 yards behind the line of scrimmage, around and back and forth on one play, and threw a pass, 18-yard completion, whatever it was. I was born 20 years after Fran Tarkenton started. There's a lot of fans. Is that what is that Fran Tarkenton was the first quarterback to do stuff like that, right?
Oh, yes. And his coach, he beat the Bears 37-13 by running around like a madman. And his coach was mad after the game because he didn't want a scrambler because Van Brocklin had a gut on him like me, later in his life. And he'd go back and stand in the pocket and never run more than a yard, and just use his great arm, as we call it now, great arm talent.
Yep.
To just throw the ball all over the place. It was, Van Brocklin never forgave Tarkenton for being mobile. It's an amazing world. I wish he's one of those guys that I was too. One of the rare things I was too young for is ever dealing with Van Brocklin, and because he was nuts. He was fighting with Klobuchar in a bar up there.
He was a really bad drunk, is what he was.
Mean drunk, and he'd get he'd go home and after a loss and get melancholy and get hammered and then make the guy. Then they run him. They were up in Bemidji for 7 weeks. Spring training camp, 7 weeks, played 5 exhibition games, 5 exhibition games, 14 regular season games.
The incredible
before that, they'd only played 12. They added 2 for the expansion team.
The incredible thing, Pat, about that too is just how far the sport has come. Is that the first ever game played at the Met against the Chicago Bears by an expansion team in this town, which had just become big league. I believe Mark Rote was 9,000 short of capacity.
Yeah, they were built. They were increasing the size of the stadium was being built, completed in a different fashion. When the Twins weren't home, they were still building. They were adding the deck upstairs longer.
In left field, yeah,
second deck longer. But yeah, I think. The first fall, it was 41,000. It got up to 47 or 8, right?
Right.
When they built the Vikings paid for that grandstand out in left field, but when they opened, they just had bleachers in left field.
But 9,000 short.
Yes.
Like that's incomprehensible now, but back then.
Well, the Gophers had gone to the Rose Bowl, and then there was great anticipation that they were going to be great again, and it was a Gopher town. We were. Plus, you had to make your choice, right? If you were going to spend $3.50 or $4 for a Gopher ticket, you couldn't then go out and, piss away another $4.
Dad didn't have the extra $4.
For God's sakes, our Norwegians weren't going to be throwing their money around.
I mean, you got to buy a pennant.
What people can't
popcorn.
What people don't remember is. What money was back then. Money was like, there was, if you were going to getting $5 out of the old man was like a $5 bill was like a prize, you know.
Which is why you now don't carry less than a 20.
Yeah, you can't get in my billfold if you're a 10 or a 5. Only that goes in the pocket, 10s and 5s. Only 20s and 50s. Sorry, the garbage truck is out here making a lot of noise.
Yeah, it's dumping your cash off for the week. It sounds like
that is true. That is true. But yeah, I mean, it was financial. Well, what somebody sent me a World Series ticket, $6 for 65. $6, and it was a seat, not a walk general admission. It was a regular seat. So, you know, it's money was part of it. That's it. You know, plus parking, probably a $2 to park too. For God's sakes, $4 to get in, $2 to park, and 75 cents for a beer. Are you crazy?
That's the genius of the Falcons, man. I don't know if they're still doing it, but when they opened that Mercedes-Benz or whatever the new stadium is, a $1.5 billion palace, and they said beer's going to be $4, hot dogs are going to be $3. It's just like the Masters.
You know, the guy who should be complaining to get the hell out of someplace, Matt Ryan. They are awful.
Yeah,
and they hired a guy, Arthur Smith, whose claim to fame is his father owns FedEx and the kid's a billionaire. You know, in his own right, the kid's got $1 billion and he's trying to pretend like he's a football coach. Come on, go buy an island somewhere.
You know, the problem for Matt Ryan is it's a similar problem that Kirk Cousins has. Those are the two highest cap hits in the NFL next year. So offloading the $48 million cap hit of Matt Ryan and the $45 million cap hit of Kirk Cousins.
Isn't that the problem if the Packers get rid of Rodgers too? It's like $45 million.
They jacked it. Yeah, they jacked his cap up to 45 or 46 next year. But I think they can, much like the Vikings with Kirk, they can trade or cut him, and they're only responsible for like a fraction of that. I mean, they're still have to eat some money, but
the cap takes the hit, right? They don't pay the money, but they
not necessarily.
Doesn't the cap take a big hit? I thought it
did. A fraction might, but not the entire thing. If the Vikings trade Kirk after the season, I believe they take a $10 million cap hit and they save 35. So,
what is wrong with you guys? Everybody says trading Kirk. There is nobody insane enough to trade for Kirk at that kind of money.
Only takes one, Pat.
Nobody is trading for Kirk.
Oh, it only takes one.
Pat.
No, but
like
you could
trying to trade D'Lo.
The CFL lacks quarterbacks. The CFL lacks quarterbacks.
You allow him to do an extension and lower his cap hit with his new team. That's what you do.
That's assuming Kirk wants to play ball and not play hardball.
Nobody. Washington wants Tyler Heineke instead of him, for God's sake.
He'd take an extension. Come on. Teams are desperate. You got to find one dumb team.
Well, look in the mirror.
I can make some calls right now. I'll find one dumb team. And no, it doesn't start in Egan.
All right. So Pat's got the Vikings losing this weekend, but rebounding against the lowly Seahawks in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
All right.
And now if Kendricks doesn't play, all bets are off.
Then it's then everyone's getting fired in about a month from now.
Yes.
All
right, Pat. We'll see you next week.
See you, Jess.
All right, that's wrapping with Reusse here on Mackey and Judd. Love the history lesson there too. 60 years of scrambling quarterback legacy.
Oh, it's outstanding. Tarkenton was fun, man.